Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining. Tonight we are learning. We're learning L'Refuah Shalema for Rafal Avram Nisanel ben Mashaliba, as well as Refuah Shalema to Avram Yaakov ben Yael, and L'Chayla Chava Bas Chai Esther. We're also learning Le'ili Nishmas of Rabbi Avram ben Reb Chaim Yehuda and Yecheskel ben Avraham. Rabbi Avram. Okay, so tonight it's technically a class of the Hayashar, but it's really apropos for before Rosh Hashanah, and you'll soon see why as the class, probably all the way at the end, you really understand the full picture of why and how this is related to Rosh Hashanah. So just to give a little bit of a background. So the Hayashar, whenever we speak about give a class in the Hayashar, it's not directly inside from the Hayashar. We don't use all the information from the Hayashar. It's a class based on the Hayashar. So I think the Hayashar, we use that as a sort of a foundation, and then we branch off in a bunch of different topics. So the reason for that is twofold. Number one is that there are many classes on the Hayashar, plain and straight and simple, with just the English and the Hebrew. Now they have Baruch Hashem, they came out with an English Sefer on the Hayashar translation, so you could read it yourself. So this is really to branch it out, to understand it in a little bit in better depth, and to give something that isn't given anywhere else. The Hayashar is a fabulous, amazing Kabbalistic Sefer, which gives us a wealth of information. So we only really spoke about the first parak. I mean, we spoke about the introduction and then the first parak. But the first parak, the beauty of this farm, when you really go into it. So most people, the way that they learn things is they learn it more on a superficial level. And I'm saying most people because, again, you have people that really go into the depth, into the kishkas, as you would say, into a certain topic. But most people in general will go and will listen to or learn a topic briefly, and that's how many people go through in life. That's not the way that I like to do things. I like to go to do things in depth, and I think that is extremely important. The more that if you want to understand the Sefer, if you really want to go through the Sefer, you have to understand the full picture of the Sefer. You have to understand how it begins and how one chapter connects to the next chapter, the next parak. This is especially true for, let's say, a Sefer like the Tanya, for example. The Tanya is very connected. Anybody that learns the Tanya has to go and has to realize you have to go from the first parak. You have to know what the first parak says before you go to the second. And when you get to the 32nd parak, you have to know also the beginning of it. So, and that really goes to most Sfarim, that you really have to know there's a reason why these giants in Torah went in a certain manner and they presented the information in a certain way, and one thing generally, not always, but generally leads to another. So the first chapter, the first parak in Hayashar spoke about thought, spoke about wisdom. How do you utilize your mind? The Hayashar begins with the pasuk of Hashem b'chachma yasad ha'aretz, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God created the world with wisdom. And wisdom is something that is more unique to human beings, because we have the ability to go and deduce things and learn things, and we have the ability to go and either create and build on the wisdom, or we have the ability to destruct on the wisdom and on the understanding. So a person's intelligence is extremely, extremely important to fulfilling a person's mission in the world. It's extremely important to the impact that the person will have in this world. The next topic that the Hayashar speaks about is about sight, is about looking, guarding your eyes. Now, there are two aspects that the Hayashar speaks about. Number one is when you see something, how do you perceive it? What's your thought? And he connects it to your thought. Like, what's your thought process so you see something, now what do you think about? So that's how it connects it from the first parak. Now you see something, now how you connected it. So that's just sight in general. But there is also something that the Hayashar speaks about, and that's dealing with immorality. We're looking at things that you're not supposed to, utilizing your eyes for the negative, the negative things. And we're going to speak about both aspects of it, and both aspects is very important, both for men and for women as well. And just to give like a overbranching, I don't know if you want to call it a title, but an understanding on how important the wisdom and the sight is that we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes, right? Based on the Gemara and Shabbos, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes, God goes, everything measure for measure, midah keneged midah, everything is measure for measure. So when things are measure for measure, you have the way that you're going to go and the way that you're going to see other people or judge other people is the way that God will judge over you. Keep that in mind as we go along. And that's a little, hint to something that's related to, to Rosh Hashanah, to the coming day, the judgment day of how we will be judged. And I can't emphasize how important that aspect is. So before we begin, as usual, we like to give a little bit of a background on, a certain topic or whatever topic we are dealing with. So in dealing with sight, there are certain senses, there's certain like things in general that we underestimate, and there are certain things that we overestimate. There are certain topics or certain ideas or certain concepts that we don't realize the importance of it or the impact that it has of it, and there are other areas that we overemphasize or we extend. We think that, oh, this is going to be a huge impact, and really it's not the biggest deal. Sight, eyes, the way that you see things is something that is very, very I can't say underrated, but it's the importance of it is not really fully understood, that how it affects everybody's day-to-day life. We know that there is a pasuk in Bamidbar, in the 15th chapter and 39th pasuk. There's a famous pasuk that we say it in Kriya Shema every single day. The literal translation, you should not go after levavchem, your hearts, and your eyes, that you are that you're striving after, that you're leading at, towards. So the Gemara in Brachos, page 12b, tells us, what does that mean after your hearts? This refers to atheism, not believing in God or idolatry, or taking that idea and going after your hearts. But what about your eyes? Your eyes refers to immorality. So the pasuk again tells us every single day, be careful on your heart and on your eyes. Your heart's referring to atheism, not believing in God, and your eyes on immorality. And you don't even realize how high of a level that's in the same sentence, right? So you have you have like idolatry, you have not believing in God, which is on it's part of the 10 commandments, right? It's really up there. And then you have the eyesight is also up there, and you're like, wait a minute, shouldn't that be that's not in the 10 commandments? Shouldn't that be further down? Why is that even in the same sentence? That, okay, I understand atheism, I understand idolatry, I understand that you shouldn't think about that, but the eyes, what's the big deal of the eyes? So the Vilna Gaon writes about the great power that the eyesight has on your soul, on your neshama. And he compares it to the effect that it has on your hearing. So if somebody explains the Vilna Gaon, and you have a split second to look at something, and you look at that one thing, that the neshama, right? So everything that you see, the soul absorbs. There is... the neshama is actually right behind the eyes, where the neshama, the ruach nefesh, we're not going to go into all the details, I think we spoke about that plenty, but the neshama is right behind your in your head, right behind your eyes. That's the origin of where it is. And the soul, the neshama, when the eye sees something, it's able to absorb something so much greater than when it's able to, let's say, hear something. And that's what he compares it to, the difference between hearing and seeing. So when you see something, even if it's for a split second, it's not easily forgotten. It's ingrained in you. But that's not necessarily the case with someone what they hear. If they hear something, did I hear it correctly? Did I not? It's weaker, if we can use that word. And when you see something, it's very clear. It's something that there's very little room for doubt. And that's not the case when you hear. And that's why there's a lot of people, that there's a saying, seeing is believing. And so you have a different aspect, a different, understanding, there's a different effect that sight has on your body than any of the other senses. And in fact, from the first averos that we see in the Torah, it starts with sight. Actually, the first sin, if you look at even if the first sin, the eating of the Eitz Hadas, eating of the tree, the snake, the Nachash, urges Chava, you're gonna eat it, you're gonna get you wisdom. But what convinced her? What was the convincing, the nail that just finally knocked it in? And that's the pasuk in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. Vatira ha'isha, the woman saw, Chava saw. You know what? Put it over that, she saw it. The tree is good to eat, and it was like a delight for the eyes. The problems that come to people start from sight. And we see this when you go through sins. I will soon, bring a few sources. When you go through sins, most of them begin with the eye. Cain, when Cain went and he saw that only Hevel sacrifices were accepted, he became jealous and he committed murder. Where did that stem from? That stemmed from the sight. Ham saw that his father Noach was unclothed, and then he went and he disgraced him. Again, uses the terminology. So we're not going to go through all the psukim, but you can go look it up. Lot saw the fertile plains of Sodom. He saw that it was a bad area, right? Sodom is very, very bad. But what caused him to go there? He saw, look how amazing it is, look how fertile it is, look how luscious it is. The grass over there is going to be great for the animals, it's going to be very prosperous. So he went over there. Avimelech saw the beauty of Sarah, and then he went and he brought it to her palace. Yosef's brother saw the way that Yaakov gave Yosef a special coat, and that's what one led to another. And this is what the Paleo it brings down, that says that no sins are done without first the looking of one's eye. And the Yars of Devash, Rabbi and Eibshitz, brings down that all the plots of the Yetzirah, especially concerning forbidden relations, they all start through the eyes. That's how it starts. And through this, says the Yars of Devash, Rabbi and Eibshitz, that you go and you could violate all the sins of the Torah through the eyes. And it's something very interesting that if you know how the angel of death looks like, the Malach HaMavis is looked like full of eyes. A very, very scary... By the way, we're going to speak a little bit about if anybody's young or anybody's not into, not the ability to be able to sleep. Maybe this class wouldn't be the best thing to listen to, or maybe it would. Maybe it would scare you straight. I don't know. But the angel of death is full of eyes. If you could just picture that's this monstrosity of an angel that just eyes everywhere. And that's eyes. And we're not going to get into the details. Maybe we'll speak about it at one point of where those eyes come from and how they are, what's the source and the origin and the purpose of those eyes. But we see over here the angel of death in itself is the eyes. The Gemara in Nedarim, page 64b, tells us that Arba Chashuvin Meis. There are 4 people that are considered, they're alive, but they're considered as if they're dead. There is an ani, a poor person. A mitzayra is someone who is a leper. Visuma is a blind person. Put that on the side. Umisha ein lo banim, and whoever doesn't have any children. So we have here 4 categories, right? There's a poor person, a leper, a blind person, and a person who doesn't have any children. Why? Out of all the senses, the only one that a person is not considered alive is someone who doesn't have the sense of sight. Why is it not maybe someone who doesn't have the ability to hear, or someone who doesn't have the ability to taste, or someone who doesn't have the ability to smell or touch? Why specifically sight is the one that only falls in this category? And one of the reasons is that one of the most important senses, if not the most important senses, in fact, probably is the most important sense, is the sense of sight. And I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody goes and has a tremendous amount of money. He has mansion, boats, and yachts, and private jets, and has everything. Which sense is the one that's going to hinder that pleasure the most? So let's think about it. If someone can taste, they could still enjoy their wealth. If somebody goes and doesn't have a sense of touch, they could still enjoy their mansion, they could still enjoy their flights. But what happens if somebody doesn't have a sense of sight? If somebody doesn't have the ability to see? What's a mansion for somebody who is blind? If you think about it for a second, all that means is that person just has to walk further to get to wherever they need to get to. Do they have any enjoyment? And again, this is my own thought process. I was pondering, I was thinking about it, and I'm like, what enjoyment does a person have? And maybe this is what the Gemara, this is my own interpretation, maybe this is what the Gemara is saying, that this is why a blind person is considered dead, because even if they have money, even if they have everything, they don't have that enjoyment. Unfortunately, they don't have that enjoyment of anything that they would have. They don't have the ability to be able to enjoy all the luxuries of life, and it's not the same for the other senses. Yes, maybe if you don't have the sense of taste, you're not able to enjoy food, but you're still able to enjoy everything else. If you don't have the sense of touch for whatever you want to take that, assuming that it's not paralyzed, right? Assuming that you just have let's say no feelings or whatever it is in a person's hands. So you can still enjoy the mansion, you could still enjoy the life, you could still enjoy the yachts, the planes. You're still able to enjoy life, but sight sight is up there. Sight is up there that if you don't have that, then it's almost that it's all meaningless. Like, what enjoyment can you have from sitting in a room that's 6,000 square feet and 3 stories high with beautiful chandeliers and marble floors and marble walls and who knows what other amazing art is on there? What enjoyment does a person have from it? And we begin to understand the brach, the blessing of the eyes, but also the power and the importance of what our eyes hold. And this, let's begin with the Hayashar. The Hayashar starts off with a pasuk in Tehillim. In Tehillim chapter 119, Kufyat has verse 37. Haver einai mirais shav b'derchecha chayeni. Dovid HaMelech says, turn my eyes from seeing vanity and your ways to sustain me. So this is how the Hayashar begins the second paragraph, which is like phenomenal when you like look at it from like the bird's eye view and how like the Hayashar was building everything. So he first started off with wisdom, and now he brings it up to sight. But it's not just the sight that the Hayashar is going to go. Now the Hayashar is going to connect the sight to the wisdom, the sight to the thought. So the Hayashar goes on and says that a person has to know that many, many, many things depend on sight. And it also depends on how we utilize the sight and utilize our thought process. So therefore, says the Hayashar, when someone wakes up in the morning and a person looks at a house, what should you think about, right? In general, the way that our brain works, the way that most brains work, that most people work, is that they go and they're just going out through their day. Their mind is working there. Their eyes, they're able to focus, they're able to drive, they're able to walk, they're able to do something else, but they're not really looking and like taking that information, translating it consciously, subconsciously, and understanding what they're saying. So the Hayashar is saying, no. The way that you're supposed to do it is when you look at something, then you consciously have to think about something, right? You have to think about what you're looking at. So if you're looking at a house, you should reflect on the mitzvos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God gave us on a house. So let's say you look at a house, you think about the mitzvah of mezuzah. We have an obligation to put on each doorway a mezuzah. Or you could look at a house and you say there's an obligation that you have to put a makkah, you have to put a protective wall, a protective fence, so that a person doesn't fall off the roof. So there are positive commandments that God gave us for a certain mitzvah. So what's happening is that your eyes are looking at something, you're taking that vision, you're connecting it with your mind, and now what you're doing is that you're cloaking it in holiness, because you're connecting that vision in your mind to a mitzvah that the Torah says. So you're taking the information, you're processing it, and you're creating it into a holy, positive mitzvah thought. And he goes on, the Hayashar, that let's say you see a clean animal, you're walking, like again, back in those days, there were animals, people were farmers, and they had animals, so you see a clean animal. What does a clean animal mean? A kosher animal. So you could think about, okay, there's a mitzvah of karbanos, there's a mitzvah of sacrificing, you could think about the Beis HaMikdash, you could utilize your mind to think about it in the Torah aspect, in the mitzvah aspect, in a positive aspect. And then let's say you're walking and you see an impure animal. So you could have, a thought process that the Torah says you're not allowed to eat an impure animal. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see a non-Jewish person. You could think about, okay, there's a command, there's an obligation, there's a commandment that you're not allowed to go and intermarry with them unless they convert, whatever it is. But I'm saying, so you have the ability to take it, and the Hayashar says you could take that information, each person according to their level of understanding, right? So you have a well-learned person could go into really deep detail on each, vision that or sight that he sees or she sees, and then you have someone on a lower level that they could just, the basics, but each one on their level, you have the ability to go and understand it and comprehend it and take that sight, turn it into a positive thought and connect that thought and then cloak it into holiness. So one of the proofs that the Hayashar brings down is that of an animal, of a bird that is called bas hayana. This is a bird that it lays its eggs, but what the mother does, of the mother of the bird does, is she stares at them, piercing them with her gaze until the chick emerges. Now like taking that information, there are many studies done, the power of the vision, right? So have you ever walked down the street and suddenly you had the feeling that someone's looking at you? Women are more perceptive to this than men. Men are more in spaced out zone. But let's say you're walking down the street and suddenly you feel like someone is staring at you. and you look around and you don't see, and all of a sudden you look up and like in the far corner, like you see someone like really staring at you. So there were studies done, very interesting. There were studies done that can your body perceive. These are not like Jewish religious studies. These are, usually neurosciences studies of can your body perceive if someone's looking at you? Can you have that feeling that, oh, the like creepy feeling someone's staring at me? So there's a bunch of different studies. There was a lot of studies that were done regarding people that had visual impairments, if they could sense that somebody else is looking at them. And again, I'm not going to go through all the studies, but a lot of these studies were based off that if you saw someone in the corner of your eye or someone who you thought, and then you had that feeling afterwards. I'm not going into those type of studies because those are completely different from what we're dealing with. But there are other studies that were done that were you didn't notice anybody. You're walking, you didn't see anybody, you didn't see anything, and all of a sudden you had like this feeling like someone's watching me. And I'm not saying like, let's say you're in a dark alley and you're like, okay, this is like, in your senses are a little bit heightened, the fright or flight, senses are heightened. I'm talking about a normal scenario. You're walking down the street and all of a sudden like you have this like weird feeling that someone's looking at you. So there was a study done by the University of Oxford, the Nuffield Department of Clinical Neuroscience, where human beings, they came to the conclusion, can sense when they're being watched. And there were studies after studies that were done with this, that even without directly seeing the observer, you're able to sense it. This is, usually referred to as either gaze detection or psychic staring effect, where you have that weird feeling that we can't understand that somebody has the ability to look at you. And again, there's obviously many, many sources in the Torah regarding ayin hara, evil eye. There's different things where suddenly you sense that there's something that is, something that is a little bit off. Unfortunately, people, misunderstand this, and people think that if something bad is happening to them, it's automatically that it's an evil eye or somebody's looking at them negatively. Chances are it's more other things than that, but people usually fall to that category because it's an easy blame. It's an easy way to point and say the reason why bad things happening is because of that person, has nothing to do with me. It's because of that person. They're looking at me. It doesn't matter that I'm not keeping Shabbos, Nias, or kosher, or learning the way that I'm, like all my problems. That nothing. It's the other person. That's one of the reasons that people fall into that. But there really is a truth to the matter, and this is where ayin hara falls into, and this is where people are looking at, staring at other people. Again, the study was done in a way, not that there's a quick glance, but there's actually someone is like staring at it, and people can usually sense this, and very interesting. And sometimes it's in very crowded situations. Let's say you live in New York City, and you're in the subway, and it's full, and suddenly you feel like, okay, something's weird, and you're looking around, and then all of a sudden you spot someone from the other side of the cart is sitting there and staring at you. And how did you come to that realization? There's something inside which science cannot fully understand. Again, they call it the gaze detection, but there's something in there. But the reason is because Riyah, sight, has a tremendous power. It has a tremendous power. And this is why we see the power of it. The Gemara tells us in Avodah Zarah, page 20a, tells us that that's why people have to have a protective fence that protect a person from gazing for looking at anything that can bring a person to Avera. And it brings, the Hayashar brings down a situation of, let's say, a man. If a man is looking at places that he shouldn't look at, and he brings down the first pasuk that the Hayashar starts with, Haver einai miros shav, protect turn away my eyes from seeing something. Shav is vanity, but Shav Shin Vav Aleph, the numerical value is 307, the same numerical value as Shin Zayin. Shin Zayin is the acronym for Shechel Zera, for wasting seed. A person has to be careful, says Dovid HaMelech, you have to be careful, turn my eyes from seeing Shav, make sure that I don't look at anything inappropriate, that a Chas v'Shalom won't come to any inappropriate action that comes out of that. But this is not only important for men. This is also very, very important for women. Women, in fact, internalize things more than men. So looking at improper things for whatever, that doesn't have to be just immorality, it can be other things as well. That looking at improper things can be very detrimental to a person's soul, to a person's outlook. And that's why I have a very weird dislike that I can't understand. Like people that are very obsessed with celebrities and their celebrity lives. These are not proper people, right? These are not people that are into the highest standards of morality. These are not the people that one should look at, to. I mean, day in and day out. One recently just came out with a full slew of allegations against this person, and it's one after another that they come up. So people are obsessed with these, with these things. And again, their mindset. I mean, the celebrity mindset mindset, the celebrity mentality. It goes and it infuses into a person's thought process as well. We don't realize how much we internalize from our surroundings. So the Hayashar goes and explains that what we're supposed to do is we're supposed to be careful in what we look at, but not only be careful about what we look at, even if we're looking at something that you could say that it's like neutral. You're looking at a house, you're looking at you're looking at a person, you're looking at an animal, but you have to go and you have to utilize your mind to go and translate it into a holiness aspect of it, and that's you're cloaking your vision with a powerful spiritual protector. And this perspective, this perception, if you will, is extremely, extremely important. And I speak about this very often because I feel like it's so important. The way that you perceive things, the way that you see things, the way that you understand things is going to define who you are and what your outlook is in life. So there was a very, I love, this is something from Rabbi Fran that brings down, I definitely spoke about it before. I don't know if I spoke about it on camera or not, but this is something that's definitely worth repeating so many times. So there's a medrash. There's a very famous medrash that there was a peddler that went into the city and he started screaming, "Who wants life? Who wants life?" Now, again, you're speaking about someone, that sounds pretty interesting. Okay, let's hear what the person has to say. So the Gemara brings down the story and says one of the Tanaim was okay. It was like, oh yeah, I want life. What's this peddler saying? And this peddler goes and says a pasuk in Tehillim. A pasuk in Tehillim, a verse in Psalms, chapter 34, verse 13 and verse 14. A very famous two psukim in Tehillim. Mi ha'ish ha'chofetz Chaim oyev yamim liras. Who is someone who loves life, who desires life, who loves days to see good? Guard your mouth from speaking evil and from your lips from speaking deceitfully. Meaning, in a simple interpretation, this peddler came up, stood on a chair, and says, "Who wants life? Who wants life?" And everybody gathered around. "Oh, you want life? Then you have to be careful how you speak." That's the simple understanding of this, of the story of this pasuk. And then this Amora, which again, Amora is on time of the Gemara. It was like, I've never heard such an amazing chiddush. It was like, it blew his mind. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, the Mara never understood it until this amazing secret, until this peddler came up. But like, so many commentaries ask, what do you mean you never understood it? It's a very famous, in davening, right? We say davening this on the Shabbos morning. This is in davening. Who is the one that desires life? This is a pasuk in Tehillim. People that say Tehillim, say it every single day. This is something that's very famous. What's the big chiddush? What's the big, like revelation that we have over here by this peddler? So I want to share with you something that he brings down from Rav Nissen Alpert. This is something that's so amazing and so important on so many levels. What's the novelty that this peddler brought out? It wasn't the pasuk. Everyone knows the pasuk, right? Anybody that's been religious for a while, that's been praying for a while, that's been saying Tehillim for a while, knows this. Though knows this first. But the novelty of it, the chiddush of it, was the punctuation, right? It all depends on where you punctuate. There's the famous funny story, which is not real, obviously, but there was a police officer that went and pulled over a guy, and he said, like you made an illegal U-turn. And the police officer, "Didn't you see the sign?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I saw the sign." He looks at the sign. The sign's right there. It says "No U-turn." And the person says, "No, that's not how I read it. I read it no, U-turn. You could turn. I could turn. That's why I turned." It's all about how we perceive things. It's all about the punctuation of where we put the comma, where we put the question mark. So the chiddush, the novelty of this peddler that he brought down, he says, where is the question mark in this verse in Tehillim? So the verse in Tehillim is Mi ha'ish ha'chofetz Chaim oyev yamim v'liras tov. When you read it, you would think, who is a person that desires life, wants to see good? The question is after that first pasuk, at the end of it. Explains Rav Nissen Alpert, that's not that. The chiddush is where he put the question mark. You want to know where the question mark goes? The question mark goes, who is the person that desires life? Mi ha'ish ha'chofetz Chaim. That is the question. That is already the question mark. The answer begins with oyev yamim liras tov. The answer already begins who desires, who loves days and wants to see good. It says this is how you read this pasuk, and this was the chiddush of this Amayra. Beautiful, so amazing, it's unbelievable. This is like if you just understood this aspect of this entire class, like it was like you like scored big. Who is someone who desires life? That is the question. The answer is the person that sees good. The person that loves days and wants to see good. Meaning that we think when you speak bad, when you speak Lashon HaRah, when you speak evil language, and it's very interesting. The Hayashar in the second parak, I don't think we're going to get to that part. We'll probably speak about the next time we speak about the third parak. We'll connect it, but he speaks about eyesight and speech in the same parak. And here we see where the connection that people think that where does Lashon HaRah begin? Where does evil speech begin? You think that it begins with the mouth, the tongue, the mouth, whatever, like this vicinity, but really. Explains Rabbi Albert. No. You know where it begins? It begins with the eyes. If someone has a negative outlook, then they see negativity, and then it goes into their mouth, and then they speak negativity. It all begins with the sight. Chofetz Chaim, who is someone who desires life? If someone sees good, that person will desire life, and hence you won't speak evil. If someone always sees the benefit, if someone always sees the great, they will never see the evil. They will never speak evil because they never understand. They don't see it that way. They're always judging favorably. They're always looking at the positivity. They're always looking at the benefit. So they're not looking at the bad. If they're not looking at the bad, they don't see the bad, and hence it doesn't come out to that. So where does evil speech begin? Evil speech begins with the eyes. So this is where the positive attitude of a person reflects on how they see things in the world and how they react to things in the world. So you could be jealous of somebody or you could be happy for somebody. And that doesn't depend on what, it all starts with the eyes. But it's not only that it starts with the eyes, it starts with the eyes and how you connect that vision to your mind and how you connect that thought process to the sight that you just saw. Are you going to encompass it in jealousy or are you going to encompass it in positivity and saying, yeah, thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you're giving my neighbor this, you're giving my friend this, you're giving my enemy even this. We shouldn't have enemies, but if you're giving the enemies, you know, like it all depends, it all starts, it all originates from the eye. And this says Rabbeinu Yonah Shari Tshuva, in the end of the third shah, the third gate. There's different aspects of Lashon HaRah. There's 6 different categories, but the last category is something that's called a nirgan. What is a nirgan? The Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei explains this. If you want to look it up, it's in the Mishlei, chapter 18, verse 8. Shlomo HaMelech explains this, that simply a nirgan is a complainer. A nirgan is someone who goes and complains, who always complains, who always has something sort of negativity. And that is the root cause of Lashon HaRah. That is the root cause of evil speech, is being negative. And that's why, who wants life? You want to know who wants life? See good. If you see good, you'll enjoy life. You'll appreciate life. You'll love life. But if you're a negative person, if you're a down person, you won't be able to appreciate life. And Rabbi Fran brings down a story from Rabbi Ephraim Shapiro. It's a mashal, it's a parable, but it's a great parable nonetheless, that there was a religious Catholic woman, Roman Catholic woman, that she lived in America, and she decided that they're going to do a trip. Saved up a lot of money, they're going to go a trip to Italy, to visit Rome, to visit the Vatican, to visit the Pope. So before she flies out, she goes to her hairdresser. She wants to make sure she got her hair done. She looks all good for the Pope. She makes sure she looks all good for her trip. And she's sitting over there. She's chatting with the hairdresser. And the hairdresser is saying, "So where are you going? What's the occasion for this?" She says, "I'm going to Rome. I'm going to Italy." And the hairdresser says, "Italy? Oh my God, what a disgusting, that place is filthy, that place is disgusting, there's litter all over, the people are so not nice, it's a terrible city." "How are you flying?" the hairdresser asks. She says, "Oh, we're flying, whatever, United, Continental, pick your, fancy." And she says, "Well, you're flying Continental, you're flying that airline? That airline is terrible. The seats are so cramped, you barely have ability to breathe. The air conditioning is so low over there. The cushions are not good. The flight attendants are always in a bad mood. Oh, I can't believe you're flying with this, this flight, with this airline." So then the hairdresser says, "So where are you staying?" So she names a certain hotel saying that hotel, oh my gosh, I've been to that hotel. What a dump. That place is everything. Well, it's so terrible. There's nothing good about that hotel. She's like, you're going to Rome. You're going to all this trouble. What's your main purpose of the visit? She says, I want to go to the Vatican. I want to visit the Pope. And she said, I signed up that I'm able to have a private session with the Pope. The hairdresser started laughing. He said, you're going to have a private, it's going to be you and 5,000 other people having a private session with the Pope. And she finishes her hair, and she goes on. Meanwhile, this woman flies to the Vatican, meets the Pope, does everything, comes back, about 6 weeks later to do her hair again. And the hairdresser says, so, how was your trip? Was it everything that didn't I warn you? So she was like, how's your flight? So she says, the flight was overbooked. And what happened is that they ended up bumping us, not to business, but they bumped us to first class. And, lay flat seating. We were able to eat on nice plates. This unbelievable, the chef prepared us this food. And, the hairdresser's like, okay, so what about the hotel? And they were like, the hotel was, our room wasn't ready. There was issue with construction. They ended up bumping us from one level to another. We ended up in the presidential suite. We had the view that's unbelievable. The room was magnificent. It was huge. And she's like, so what about Rome? Didn't I tell you it was so messy? She's like, Rome was beautiful. We were able to visit all the ruins. We were able to go and visit all the things. The weather was nice. Everything was great. And then the hairdresser finally pulling out the last string. So what about the Pope? Are you able to you're able to speak to the Pope? She said, so this woman said, you're not going to believe what happened. We're sitting in line with thousands of people waiting to meet the Pope. All of a sudden, 2 Swiss soldiers come up and walk right up to me and my husband. And he says, you too? Coming with me. And they brought us directly up to the Pope. And we sat, us and another couple, just us 4 people. We were sitting with the Pope. And the Pope was going and telling us, I noticed that you guys are from not around here. You guys from America. I want to say how grateful that we are that you guys travel so far to come and visit us over here. It gives us tremendous amount of chizuk, the Pope says. He didn't use that word, right? I'm paraphrasing. He says, it gave us tremendous amount of chizuk that you're coming over here. And he starts speaking about it. He says, it's so amazing, everything that you've done. He says, but I got to ask you a question. He says, you flew so much, you did so far, but one thing that's bothering me so much, and that's why I called you over, who did your hair? It looks terrible. And the Pope, this is what she's telling to the hairdresser. And the nimshal, the lesson that we learned, someone that's a negative, someone that's a downer, someone that's always looking at the negative, their negativity is all around them. They're not able to accomplish a lot in life. They're not able to do a lot in life. They're always negative. Someone that has positivity is always able to accomplish more, is always able to conquer more, is always able to do so much more. I've met, Baruch Hashem, so many people in my years of speaking and dealing in the public, and you see people that are negative, people that are down, people that are depressed or whatever reason, and they are stuck in their corner. And then you meet people that are happy that shouldn't be happy, or that are confident that shouldn't be confident, and they're accomplishing things that you would never have dreamed of them being able to accomplish. And it all depends on the mood. It all depends on how you perceive things and how you see things. And if you're able to see things in a positive, then it takes it into your mind. You're in a better mood. If you're in a better mood, you're able to accomplish more. There are plenty of studies done. There are studies upon studies are done that people that are more productive, more efficient, and they do better at whatever that they're doing. If they're in a better mood, you'll be a better mother. You'll be a better father. You'll be a better, teacher. You'll be a better everything if you're just going to be a better mood. And what brings down a lot is the way that you perceive things, the way that you see things. And if you see things in a positive way, then you are going to be successful. If you see things in a negative way, you're going to fool yourself to the dumps and you're not going to be successful, even at your profession, even of what you do. And unfortunately, you get to see this all the time, and you see people that, unfortunately, let's say, are depressed. They're down. And they see things in negative, and there's an anger that comes out from them. And it's very common that you see that if depressed people are also angry people. And not necessarily that they have this angry, this angry character trait. It's just that depression brings down the negativity. It brings down the anger. It brings down all these things. So it sort of, you collapse upon yourself. You self-implode with all this negativity, and all you see is bad. And then, hence, that leads to a response of anger, of frustration. So we see how many things depend on our mood. How many things depend on our mood, which depends on our thought, which depends on our sight, the way that we see things. If we're careful how we see things, if we're careful how we process things, our lives will be so much different, so much better, so much bigger, so much more amazing.
And if you take that and you add Kedusha onto it, whew, the sky is the limit. You're able to go and you're able to see things on a completely different level. So here we see how important sight is, and that's why the Hayashar goes down and continues with the preventions. If let's say you're looking at things and you're looking, how do you prevent yourself from the certain sins, for looking things that you shouldn't you look at? So it gives two pieces of advice. Number one, you should look at and envision, meditate on Hashem's name. There's a 4-letter name of Hashem, Yud, Hey, and then Vav and Hey. You have to, if you envision that, meditate on that on black ink on parchment. That's what you're supposed to meditate on. Shivisi, as a pasuk says in Tehillim, Shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid, chapter 16, verse 8. Shivisi Hashem l'negdi tamid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're supposed to put Hashem in front of you always. And that has a tremendous impact for somebody who has the ability to meditate. It's good to meditate. This is a good thing to meditate on. The Hayashar brings down another way to get yourself out of this temptation, and that is that a person should envision the image of a person's father standing next to that person. And the proof of this is where from Yosef HaTzadik, when he was tempted to sin with Eshes Patifera, he went and he saw the vision of his father, and that caused him to prevent him from going and falling into the sin. So these preventative measures are very, very important, and we're still going to speak about how important it is, but I want to relate to you a story in the Gemara. There's a Gemara in Kedushin, page 39b, that speaks about a story where there was a noblewoman who attempted to convince, or tried to convince Rabbi Hanina bar Rabbi to go and do a sin with her. And Rabbi Hanina tried to go and prevent himself from falling into this. So what was one of the things that he tried to do? He went and he uttered a few, like Shemois HaKadoshim, Kabbalistic incantations, names of God, and he brought upon himself boils and scabs, meaning that he wanted him to make himself look unappealing to this woman who had his desire to be with him. And this woman, knew a little bit of dark magic, and she went and she uttered some incantations to go and remove those boils and scabs. And when he saw that he was cured, so he ran. And he ran into, there was a certain, in the time of the Gemara, the demons, the Shadim had more power than they have today. And there was a certain bathhouse where certain areas where they hung around the bathhouses. And there's certain bathhouses that even two people, there's a way that it works with demons. We're not going to speak. We spoke about it, many, many years ago in different classes. But just the gist of it, there's depending on the level of the power of that demon that it has the ability to go and hurt or harm the person. Sometimes if you have another person with you, that already reduces the power of that demon. They won't harm you if you're more than one person. This particular, demon in this bathroom, that even if two people were in there, they would still harm this person, meaning that this was a very powerful demon, a demon that had the ability to go and cause a lot of harm, and people did not go into this bathroom because of that. And this Rabbi Hanina ran directly into this bathroom, and he stayed into this bathroom, and then he left unharmed. When the sages heard the story, they just heard that he ran into the bathroom, and he was in there with the demons, but they didn't harm him, and he was able to leave unharmed. So they went over to him and says, how did you leave? How did you go in there and leave unharmed? And they didn't wait for him to respond. It's very interesting. He says, maybe were you tempted with a certain temptation and you overcame it? And he answered in the affirmative, and that's how they came to realize the power that he had. Meaning, in the lesson that we learned from this Gemara on the story, that if someone has the temptation, if someone has a desire, and they overcome it, there is a special power that comes to them at that time. There's a special power that comes to them that has the ability to protect them and has the ability to give them tremendous amount of blessings. And in fact, the Chofetz Chaim teaches and brings down that every time someone is faced with a temptation, with a nisayon, whatever that nisayon is, whatever that desire to sin is, if they overcome it, the reward is beyond our comprehension. And it's not only the reward in the next world, you'll get reward also in this world. And the Radak brings down, that means that people will be in awe of him or her and their offsprings. The descendants brings down a bunch of blessings. The descendants will light up the world with the Torah and righteousness. They will derive great pleasure from the descendants in this world and the next world. There's a tremendous amount of blessings that happen when a person overcomes their desire, overcomes their temptation. we know Rabbi Elul Dessler brings down something phenomenal. We spoke about this quite a few times, but very, very worthy to repeat it and to really bring it down, because it really gives the person the ability to overcome temptations. That we know that there is physical traits that are passed down through a person's DNA, but there are more than that. There's also spiritual character traits that a person can pass down through their DNA, spiritual DNA, that is. But the difference is, explains Rabbi Elul Dessler, that if somebody has a physical DNA, it's passed down when the baby is born. If someone changes something in the physical aspect, it doesn't pass on in the DNA after the baby's born. Again, we're not going to speak, I'm not even dealing with plastic surgery, because that doesn't come down either. But the point is that with a physical DNA, once the baby is born, they have the DNA and that's it. It's not changing. Spiritual DNA is very different. Spiritual DNA is very, very fascinating. That, of course, if you're working on yourself on something and then you have a child, that child is ingrained with that power, that spiritual DNA. But it says of Rabbi Elul Dessler and Mechtav Elul that even after the child is born, the child is alive and well, but if a parent is working on something, that trait passes on to the child that's already born, meaning that you're able to pass on that power. So if someone unfortunately is dealing with something of always saying negatively, always looking at it down, if they work on themselves and seeing in the positive things, seeing things light in the positive aspect, that also transfers to their children. If someone has is working on themselves not to get angry or not to get upset, whatever it is, that passes on to their children as well. Meaning that if sometimes you get stuck in a, temptation to do something that's not appropriate or even just not beneficial. It's one of the things that is going to be able to push it over the top and help you overcome that. If you realize and be like, wait a minute, if I overcome this right now, I am going to now give that power also to my children that are already alive, that already, they can be in their 40s and 50s, and you could give them that power when you overcome it. Something that's so fascinating, so unbelievable, so amazing. But continues the Hayashar. I didn't realize how late it is already. Continues the Hayashar. Let's say someone is not careful, and someone falls in the sins of not looking at things that they're not supposed to, specifically in immorality. There's a Zohar. This is the source of this in Zohar and Parshas Pekudei, that there is an angel called Patos, who, the reason why it's called Patos is because he's mefate, he seduces. Patos al Shem shehu mefate levnei nasa. He goes and he seduces people to go and look at things that they shouldn't look at. They look at, that causes men to look at things that's not necessary. What happens after a person dies? They get buried in the grave. Then an angel comes, restores, this is from the Zohar, restores his soul, takes a hold of him very, very cruelty, breaks the sockets in a person's eyes, rips out the eyes, and then there's terrible, terrible afflictions with putting them in the pit with snakes and scorpions attacking them. There's terrible judgments that come upon a person that falls in this chas v'shalom, in this category of looking at things that they're not supposed to look at, says the Zohar. And the Arizal brings down that there's a certain bird, a small bird, it's called Ra'ah. And this bird, which is able to see very, very, very far, it's given this name because it uses its sight to engage in lewdness, in things that are improper. There's a base of a Gemara in Chulin, page 63b, if you want to look it up. So that Rizal adds that we know there's a thing called reincarnation, where a person comes back. Now, a person comes back as a human being. That's a very high level of reincarnation. But they're not people that can come back in different levels of reincarnation. You could come back in inanimate objects. For example, in stones and things like that. You could come back in plant life. You could also come back in animal life as well. Again, we spoke about this in reincarnation, which is many years ago. If you want to look back at those classes, but there's different levels of Gilgulim, different levels of reincarnation. Someone who is not careful in the way that they're looking at it, and they don't hold themselves back, and they don't control it, and they don't try to work on this, they can be reincarnated in this bird. And the result tells us that if there's a human being, a human soul, that that it comes back in reincarnation and in Gilgul in an animal, it's a very, very, or anything other than a human, it's very, very painful for that soul. The soul fits to a human being. And if it has to be put into something else other than a human being, it brings tremendous amount of pain and suffering to the soul. We don't have time to speak about. Maybe at one point we'll give stories about the where you see specifically in the time of the Arizal, where you have human beings went into animals and they came to the Arizal, and the Arizal gave them different ways to go and give them tikkunim, but they went through tremendous amount of suffering. So the severity of it is very, very great. And not only the severity of it is so great, but even if you're utilizing your eye for negativity, utilizing your sight for bad, it's not like you're satisfy your desire. The Ben Ish Chai brings down a pasuk in Koheles. In the first parak of Koheles, in the 7th pasuk, it says, Kol hanechalim holchim el hayam. All the rivers are flowing into the ocean. V'hayam einenu maleh, and the sea is not full. The sea is not full. There's a singer, Naftali Kempa, who brought this into took this pasuk into a song, a beautiful song. But you have over here where all these rivers are going into the ocean, but the sea does not overflow. Says the Ben Ish Chai. What does this pasuk mean? What is Shlomo Melech telling us in Koheles? That every time there is a new desire, it's like the rivers are constantly flowing into the ocean. And these are there's always these new desires that are coming in. But guess what happens? The ocean never overflows. It never feels saturated. It never feels, oh, I'm full, I'm good where I am. And that's the way that temptation works. You always get tempted from one thing to another, but it's not like it's going to satisfy you. There's just going to be another temptation right afterwards. And that is something that is very good to think about. If you go, and whatever the temptation is, even if just looking at things in a negative aspect, there's no benefit that will come out of it. Looking at things that are improper, there's no benefit that comes out of it. The desire it's not like you can fulfill that desire. It's just going to keep on coming, and it's keep on coming, and nothing's going to fulfill from it. So if you utilize your mind, you utilize your knowledge, you utilize your wisdom, like it says in the first paragraph of Hayashar, then you will realize you will come to use your sight for the right things, to look at the right things. There's a very famous story in the Gemara in Talmud, page 32b, that tells us of Alexander the Great when he went to a certain spring. We're going to try to, hurry it up because it's getting a little bit late. There was Alexander the Great, that he went to a certain spring. He was eating bread, he was eating salted fish, so he wanted to wash himself off by this spring, so by this water, and this smelled very, very different than anything else he's ever smelled before. He says there must be some sort of holiness in this. And he followed the spring along until this came to this gate. And he realized there was something spiritual stuff going on over here. And he says, let me in. And there was a response from the other side of the gate, we can't let you in, you're a wicked person. He says, well, I'm a wicked person, but I'm I'm a king, I have a lot of power. So Alexander the Great says, if you're not going to let me in, at least give me something. And they gave him an eyeball. And he takes this eyeball. What caused him to do what he did? I don't know how he came to this conclusion. He decided he wanted to weigh this eyeball. So he put the eyeball on a scale, and he put golds and diamonds and silver on the other side of the scale. And this eyeball outweighed all this kilos and kilos of gold and silver and all these things. So he went over to the sages, the Chachamim, and he says, what's going on over here? He says, how is this eye outweighing everything else? So the sages told him, this is a human eye. And that's why it's weighing everything else. It's like, what does that mean? Why would a human eye weigh, a few ounces? Like, why would that outweigh all this gold and silver, all this weight that I'm putting on it? So they said, do the following. Take a little bit of dust, a little bit of dirt, cover it over this eye, and you'll see what happens. So he takes it and he covers the dirt over the eye, and all of a sudden the eye goes up, and all the weights and all the gold and the silver and the diamonds, they go down. And the sages explained to him that the reason for the unbalanced scale is because the human eye is never satiated. It's never satisfied. No matter what it sees, it always wants more. It's never going to be balanced by all the gold, all the riches, all the temptations that they have. The eye will always want more. When it'll be finally satisfied? When there's a little bit of dirt over it. When they're going 6 feet under, after 120, then the eye realizes that there's nothing there, and that's when all of a sudden the eye will not weigh anything, and the gold will weigh everything, because an eye is never satisfied. This is an important aspect to think about when you're looking at certain things. It all depends on how you perceive them and how you look at it, what you look at. Says the Hayashar, moving along, that anything that happens, there's a garam and vesiba. There is a root and a cause. There's everything, and we speak about this very often. Anything in life, there's always something that there's a root, and then there is a cause that causes the problem down the line. The first cause for many sins is looking at impure things. And if you want to like correct that whatever sin, you have to realize where the root cause, and many times it's in the eyes. It's in the eyesight. And it's not just immorality, it's in many sins. And it says that Paleo, it's looking is very severe because it brings one to sin, and because the eye sees and the heart desire. But even if a person didn't commit any sin, didn't commit any sin, whatever it is, even with Lashon HaRah, evil eye, looking at immorality, whatever it is, it still damages the soul of that person. And not only that, it also prevents a person from seeing intellectual concepts, meaning that if someone's looking at things that they shouldn't, in the whole gamut of whatever it is that the sight you have the ability to look at, things that you shouldn't look at, that causes somebody not to be able to see things spiritually, not to be able to see things intellectually. It causes it like this fog, this cloudiness, that you're not able to comprehend things in a certain way. And the Hayashar brings down that the eye, and the Hayashar, we'll speak also about the Ben Ish Chai, the eye has 4 different colors, right? So you have the white on the outside of the eye, then you have the dark rim that's right around the iris, then you have the color of the iris, depending on the person, whether it's brown, blue, green, whatever it is, hazel, and then you have the pupil, which is again the black of the pupil. This, says the Hayashar, corresponds to the 4 letters of the divine name, Yud K and Vav K. When a person goes and looks with his eye at impure things, whatever that impure thing is, it puts an unclean spirit that hovers over it. And the Ben Ish Chai goes and on this subject, on this topic, and it says the black specifically is the symbol of evil inclination. And that's why we see through our pupils. You see through the black dot. And that is where the evil inclination traps a person through what the person sees. And in fact, the Ben Ish Chai brings down that the gematria, the numerical value of sight, which is re'iyah, is the same as gevura, which is might. Meaning that if you want to be able to overcome your temptation, you have to have that might, you have to have that gevura, which plugs in very nicely to the very famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Ezu hagibor hakoyvesh asitzrai. We know that the Yetzer Hara goes through the eye. You want to be a gibor, you have to overcome the Yetzer Hara, which is overcoming the sight, the re'iyah, which again, re'iyah and gevura is the same thing, and that's why Ezu hagibor hakoyvesh asitzrai. There's a lot to unpack in that, but we're just going to go very quickly on that. You can really dwell on that a lot. Beautiful insight from Ben Ish Chai. So then Ben Ish Chai, the Hayashar brings down further that the same reason that you're not allowed to go and look at, you shouldn't look at someone who is a sinner. You shouldn't look at someone who's an evildoer, because a person should always accustomed to look at good things and positive things. And the Peliot brings down also that he shouldn't even look at faces of idolatry, because that also induces things. That's why if, let's say, you're driving down a certain path and there's a place of idol worship, you shouldn't look at it. Now, again, sometimes people are like, I shouldn't look at it, so you're forced to look at it, right? So sometimes it's better not to do that, especially that's why I tell, my children, if if we're passing by, let's say, a church or something, I said, don't look at it. But, what happens if they look at it? Okay, fine, okay, you shouldn't look at it. You looked at it, don't, stress, oh my gosh, what to do. But it's better, because sometimes that stress causes you to go and be like, okay, I look at it anymore, or nothing happened, it causes your mind to do very, very funny things. But you shouldn't look at these things. You shouldn't look at these impure things, because it doesn't bring anything good. It brings a lot of impurity into your neshama, into your soul. And the Zohar brings down, that you're not supposed to look at a man who is angry. If a man is angry, while he's angry, a person's not supposed to look into that. Now, a person, you're not supposed to look at an angry man. So, and this is why the reverse is also true. That you're supposed to look at faces of the righteous people. You're supposed to look at tzaddikim. And that's why you have, first of all, the Degel Machna Ephraim brings down that when you look at a face of a tzaddik, your soul is illuminated with light and holiness. You feel different. And if you've ever been in the presence of a Gadol Adar, you feel different when you're sitting in front of a tzaddik. And this is very interesting. You have a lot of parents that they put pictures of tzaddikim on the baby's crib. So this is what the baby should look at. And We see this also in the Gemara in Eruvin. Page 13b speaks about that Rabbi Huda Nasi says that the reason why I am greater than my friends is because I saw Rabbi Meir from the back. But if I would have seen Rabbi Meir from the front, I would have been even greater. See, there's a special power of looking at righteous people, looking at tzaddikim, and this is a special power of when you look at good things. You look at a Sefer Torah. Specifically, the Magen Avraham brings down that when they raise a Sefer Torah in shul, it's very good to look at it. Look at specifically the letters, and if you're able to read a word or two from the scroll, is specifically good. There's also an aspect of looking for your first letter of your name, or whatever. We're not going to get into that, but there is an aspect of looking at the letters and looking at it. It brings kedusha, it brings holiness to you. If you look at the positive, the holiness of these things, it infuses holiness with you. If you look at the negative things, it infuses negativity on you. And the Hayashar says something very, very interesting. He says, where it's also beneficial to look at? It's also good to look at the heavens. Look at the sky. Look up. And it brings down specific times. You look at when the stars begin to shine. You look at when the sun begins to, at different times when you're supposed to look into heavens. When the stars begin to shine, when the sun begins to shine, and when the moon begins to shine. Again, he connects it into different things of when the side of evil, the impurity, the impure forces, the forces of impurity, they have less power during this time. And that's why it's beneficial to look at it during this time. But now I apologize, we're going a little bit late. I want to finish this thought process, so a few more minutes will be done. Now, what does all this have to do with Rosh Hashanah? What does all this have to do with coming the days of judgment? Besides the aspect of how important it is that you utilize your mind for the benefit, utilize the mind to judge other people favorably, because that's the way that when you look at other people, that's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to go and look at you. But I want to share with you something in Parshas Ki Teitzei in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 11 through 14. That speaks about a Eishes Yifas Torah. Eishes Yifas Torah, the pasuk begins V'ra'isa b'shivya. Again, it begins with sight. V'ra'isa b'shivya. You look in captivity, meaning that if the Jewish people are at war with a foreign nation, and there are the soldiers in the war, they see one soldier sees a beautiful woman, the chashakta ba, and you wanted the soldier wanted or desired her, and he took this woman for a wife. Now Rashi brings down, what's this whole idea, right? You're going into war, you're seeing this non-Jewish woman, you have to go into converter, wait 30 days. There's a whole process, by the way, to it. It's not just you're intermarrying. There's a whole process they have to do it according to halacha. But it's very interesting. It says Rashi over there. You look at Rashi, it brings down that, why is the Torah all of a sudden you see a woman, you bring her into, when do we, what's this process? It doesn't sound like a Jewish process. And the Rashi goes and says, the Torah is speaking specifically about the evil inclination, meaning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would not permit this person to marry this woman. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu God knew that if he would not permit it, then they would marry illicitly, they would take her anyway, and so HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it a way that there's a kosher way that you're able to marry this woman. But Rashi brings down at the end, you're going to end up despising this woman, and you're going to end up happening is going to be a ben Sora v'mora. It will be a wayward son that comes out of this, a troubled son that's going to come out of this, and basically nothing good is going to come out of this. This is basically the information that Torah speaks about. Well, let's try to break this down. Why would a person go and all of a sudden desire this woman? So he sees a woman in captivity and he desires her. But who are these soldiers, right? Let's think about it. These are regular soldiers that are at the gym. They're pumping iron all day. They're working on their tactics. The Torah speaks about the soldiers that went out in the Jewish army in this time were the greatest tzaddikim. That if somebody was not sure, was scared about going to war, what does that mean? They were scared. They were scared that they maybe had a sin. And what was the sin that maybe they spoke in davening? They spoke during a time that they weren't supposed to speak about. Meaning, and I'm going very brief on this because there's a lot to unpack in this, in this segment of the Torah. But basically, for all purposes of information, for what we're dealing with right now, the people at war, the soldiers for the Jewish army, were the greatest sages, meaning they were the greatest tzaddikim of the time. Those are the people that went into war. Pure people, pure souls. So how could it be someone that's such a tzaddik, such a righteous person, that they're falling into it? How they're virtually righteous? And Rabbi Friend brings down from Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, where's this righteousness of this person? So Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky explains that, there are righteous people and there are non-righteous people. Let's call them tzaddikim and non-tzaddikim. What makes a person a tzaddik? What makes a person a tzaddik is that? What makes a person righteous versus a person that's not righteous? So people think, this righteous person, they're able to conquer their evil inclination much easier. Normal people, they fall in their evil inclination, and a tzaddik or a tzaddikus is much stronger. Says Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, no, that's not what makes a tzaddik a tzaddik. A tzaddik, in fact, a righteous person or a righteous woman has a much harder or more trouble than the rest of the people. They have a harder time with their desires, whatever it is, it's more difficult for them. So what differentiates between a righteous person and a non-righteous person, between a tzaddik and a non-tzaddik? And the answer is, says Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, and listen very carefully, because the difference is a tzaddik, a righteous person, does not put himself or herself in situations that will tempt him or her to succumb. They know which situation will go and provide spiritual danger, and therefore they set up certain fences, certain guardrails, and that they prevent themselves from falling into it. And it's not that the righteous person has a stronger Yetzer Tov, has the ability to fight the Yetzer Hara. No. It's not that they have more willpower. It's that they have the ability to give themselves those protective fences to prevent themselves from falling into sins. The example that Rabbi Fan brings down is like, let's say you have someone who's on a diet. Someone who's on a diet and they're about to go to a wedding. A wedding that is going to have very, very good food. So what do? Instead of going and waiting for the wedding, they eat like vegetables or salad right before they go to the wedding. So by the time they get to the wedding, they're already full and they don't stuff themselves in the shmorg. They don't feel like they need to eat. But a person who's not careful, even if they need to lose a little bit of weight, they'll go into the wedding and they'll just stuff their face in the smorgasbord, and they just, will lose everything that they were just, dieting for. Someone that has the foresight to say, okay, wait a minute. If I am going to a pizza store and I don't want to eat pizza, let me eat something meat now so I won't be able to eat anything dairy. That's the foresight. That's what a tzaddik does. A tzaddik goes and knows that if they're going to be in a situation that's going to be spiritually dangerous, they prevent themselves from going to that situation, or they put some sort of protective fence in that situation. But that, explains Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, is easy in civilian life. You know where you're going. You're able to say, I'm not going to walk on this street. This is not a good street. I'm not going to look at this person, this particular, with this mindset because I know it's bad. You're able to put some sort of protective fences. But what happens if you're at war? If you're at war, you can't put up the protective fences. You're at war. It's life or death. You have to go. You have to be very alert, very vigilant. You have to be able to see things and react to things in instance. So you don't have the ability to put those protective fences. If you don't have the ability to put those protective fences, that's why you have a righteous person. All of a sudden he's looking at it and he's love struck. He found the woman and he's so infatuated with her. He's not in control. He sees a beautiful woman and he can't control himself. How did this happen? In regular life, it would have never happened because he would have never, or she would have never put himself in that situation. But that's the reason why the Torah says specifically over here, because you can't put those protective fences. That's why the Torah allowed it. But explains Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky. He says the timeline of this parsha, it always falls out either the week or two before Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because comes Rosh Hashanah, we come in and we tell God, we're going to be different this year. We're going to be better this year. We're going to do something different. And we say, what's different this year than all the other years? The difference is, and this is the lesson that we can learn, is don't put yourself in a situation where you will fail. Don't be careful, put those protective fences. If you have the vision to always see negative, preempt that and make sure that you don't look in negativity. Try to figure out some way to switch it to positivity, whether it's through emunah, whether it's a kasatov, whether it's just being happy or a person in yourself. That's going to cause you to go and look at things differently. That's not going to, your whole vision, your whole mindset will be very different. And this is the difference between a righteous person and a wicked person. A righteous person knows where they need to work on, and they don't say, okay, I'll work upon it when I get to that. They say, no, I'm going to make sure I don't fall into that. I'm going to put some sort of protective fences. So if, let's say, someone's going to a wedding and they care, they're a very jealous person, the personality. So they are going to already think before the wedding, I'm going to go, and if I'm going to see someone dressed nicer than me or have fancier or whatever it is, I'm going to think about it in the positive aspect. They prevent themselves from falling into that situation. You're able to go and you're able to prevent those, and that's what's going to cause you tzaddik. And that's what it says Rabbi Yaakov Galinsky, specifically the vision of you're going to see a woman over here, but what are you going to go and how are you going to prevent yourself from going, fixing it and say this is specifically put on before Rosh Hashanah? Why? Because this is going to go and help you go and guide yourself to do the cheshbon nefesh, to make sure that you're able to overcome your temptations, to make sure that you have those protective fences, that if you know you're falling in something, whatever whatever it is, specifically in your vision and what you see, because we know so many sins come from our vision, so many things come from what we see. But if you're able to change your mindset, if you're able to change the way that you see things, if you're able to change the way that you perceive things, then let's say you're someone who's struggling with Lashon HaRah, but if you're able to always see in the positive, you won't fall into Lashon HaRah. Let's say someone's struggling with immorality. If you know, then you prevent yourself from going, you put some sort of protective fences to make sure that you don't fall into that category. That's where the tzidkus lies. That's where the righteousness lies. It's all about those protective fences. It's all about realizing how you're going to protect your eyes, the most important thing. And when you take your eyes and you protect them and how are you going to now connect them? What are you going to do with that vision? Are you going to connect it with immorality? Are you going to connect it with impurity? Or are you going to connect it with kedusha? And that's how the Hayashar begins. Whatever you see, make sure that your eyes go and connect it to kedusha, connect it to holiness. Bring holiness into your life. And this is what we're going to end off with. The way that you see others is the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees you. If we have the ability, coming Rosh Hashanah, we have the ability to go and look at people in a certain way that's more positive, and judge people in a certain way that's more beneficial, and make sure that we go and put these protective fences. We tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you know what's going to be different this year, Rosh Hashanah? I'm going to be careful on my vision. For women and men, it doesn't matter in all aspects of your life. It's not just immorality. It's in all aspects of your life. How are you going to go? You know that you have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'simcha. You have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with happiness. So how are you going to go and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with happiness? Are you going to start looking at things in a better light? Are you going to start being happier? And happier begins in that sight. And how are you going to see things, and how are you going to perceive things? And how are you going to go and look at things? And sometimes it's not looking in the eyes, it's looking in the, I guess you could call it the Asian way, with the third eye. And how you see things and how you understand things, and you realize that everything is l'toiva, everything is for good. And once you do that, your entire perception changes. And this is what the Pele says, that you have to be careful because all the sins begin with the sight. And this is something so important coming to Rosh Hashanah. You want to be different. You want to be better. This is a good way to start. Start by making sure you look at things the right way. You infuse kedusha into your vision, and with that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give each and every single one of us an amazing, amazing year, a year full of bracha, tzlacha, siyata d'shmaya, parnasa, health, shalom bayis, children, everything, all the brachas ad b'lidai. Before we open up to any questions, let us say a kapitel Tehillim for Eretz Yisrael and for Klal Yisrael at large. As usual, we say kapitel Kuf Lamed, chapter 130. Say it along with me. Shir Amales. Mimama kim karasicha Adonai Adonai shema bekoili tiena aznecha kashuv voice kol tachanunai im avaynes teishmaria Adonai mi amoid ki im chaslicha leman tivarei ki visi Adonai kif so nafshi v'lidvarei hechalti nafshi l'Adonai mi shomim la'beker yachal Yisrael el Adonai ki ma Adonai achesed v'arbei ma'ifedus v'hu yiftes Yisrael mikol avaynesav Achinu kol beis Yisrael anesunim batzara uvashivya ha'oimdim bein bayam uvein bayabasha hamakim yirachim aleim v'yatziyim mitzara l'ervacha ma'afela le'ara meshiba legula hashta bagala bezman kariv v'nemar amen. Okay, we'll open up to any questions and then we will close it off. Okay, Baruch Hashem, thank you for all the kind words. How can we see? Okay, here's a question. How can we see good in someone that we actually went out of the way to someone who actually went out of the way to hurt someone physically? So we have to understand that we can never judge somebody because we're never in that mindset. We're never in that person's mindset. So you want to know how to see good in someone who is bad, let's say, who is evil, is you have to first of all, you have to realize it's a nebuch situation. And be like, it's unfortunate that a person, like unfortunate people are sick. People are sick emotionally, sick intellectually, sick, they're sick. So you look at it and be like, refuah shalema. So if someone did something very bad, be like, you feel bad for that person. In essence, people are good. And if someone does something bad, there's a reason for that. Either they didn't work on themselves, or maybe there's something more to that. You have to judge someone favorably and say, it's unfortunate. And, I can tell you it's a lot easier said than done. But it's a process that if you work on it, you could get to it fairly quickly. Maybe not fully, but you're able to get to it, fairly quickly. And that's basically the basic aspect of judging someone favorably. Okay, next question. Maybe the concepts don't really connect, but if one can bring impurity to the divine name by looking at impure sights, but a blind man is considered dead because he can't see, shouldn't the blind man considered the opposite because he never looked at impure sights. So if you're saying there's a special holiness on a blind man, then yeah, you technically there is a purity on that they refrained from sin. There's also, by the way, an impurity, the special level of purity for people that are mentally handicapped, let's call it, that they don't have the ability because they don't have the ability to sin. So yes, but they're still considered dead because they don't have the ability to appreciate life the way that everybody else does have. Okay, looks like that is the final question. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, may everyone have a blessed, most amazing week and a Hashem year.